Hi everyone, I promised I'd be back sooner. We may get a few of these week and then maybe next week. I really need to figure out a schedule for this. But here is chapter 41 of The Count of Monte Cristo, The Telegraph. On returning to their own apartments, Monsieur and Madame de Villefort learned that the Count of Monte Cristo, who had come to pay them a visit, had, during their absence, been shown into the salon where he was waiting them. Madame de Villefort was too agitated to see him at once and retired to her bedroom, while her husband, being more self-possessed, went straight into the salon. But though he was able to master his feelings and compose his features, he could not dispel the cloud that shadowed his brow, and the Count, who received him with a radiant smile, noticed his gloomy and preoccupied manner. "What on earth is the matter, Monsieur de Villefort?" said Monte Cristo, after the first compliments were exchanged. "Have you just been drawing up some capital indictment?" "No, Count," said he, trying to smile. "This time I am the victim. It is I who have lost my case, and fate, obstinacy, and madness have been the counsel for the prosecution." "What do you mean?" asked the Count with well-feigned interest. "Have you really met with some serious misfortune?" "Oh, it is not worth mentioning," said he with a callousness that betokened bitterness. "It is nothing, only a loss of money." "Loss of money is, indeed, somewhat insignificant to a man with a fortune such as you possess, and to a mind as elevated and philosophical as yours is. It is, however, not the loss of the money that grieves me, though after all 900,000 francs is worthy of regret, and annoyance at its loss is quite comprehensible. What hurts me is the ill will manifested by fate, chance, fatality, or whatever the designation of the power may be that has dealt this blow. My hopes of a fortune are dashed to the ground, and perhaps even my daughter's future blasted by the whims of an old man who has sunk into second childhood." 900,000 francs, did you say?" exclaimed the Count. "That is certainly a sum of money that even a philosopher might regret. Who has caused you this annoyance?" "My father, of whom I spoke to you." "My dear," said Madame de Villefort, who had just entered the room, "perhaps you are exaggerating the evil?" "Madame," said the Count, bowing. Madame de Villefort acknowledged the salutation with one of her most gracious smiles. "What is the Monsieur de Villefort has just been telling me?" asked Count Monte Cristo. "What an incomprehensible misfortune!" "Incomprehensible, that is the very word," exclaimed Villefort, shrugging his shoulders. "A whim born of old age." "Is there no means of making him revoke his decision?" "There is," was Madame de Villefort's reply. "It is even in my husband's power to have the will changed in Valentine's favor instead of its being to her prejudice." "My dear," said Villefort in answer to his wife, "it is distasteful to me to play the patriarch in my own house. I have never believed that the fate of the universe depended on a word from my lips. Nevertheless, my opinions must be respected in my family, and the insanity of an old man and the caprices of a child shall not be allowed to frustrate a project I have entertained for so many years. The Baron de Epinay was my friend, as you know, and an alliance with his son is most desirable and appropriate." "Notwithstanding your father's wishes?" asked Madame de Villefort, opening a new line of attack. "That is a very serious matter." Though pretending not to listen, the Count did not lose a word of the conversation. "If I may say that I have always entertained the highest respect for my father, Madame. Today, however, I must refuse to acknowledge intelligence in an old man who vents his anger on his son because of his hatred for the father. I shall continue to entertain the highest respect for Monsieur Notier. I shall submit uncomplainingly to the pecuniary loss, but I shall remain adamant in my determination. I shall, therefore, bestow my daughter's hand on Baron Franz d'Epinay, because, in my opinion, this marriage is appropriate and honorable, and, finally, because I shall marry my daughter to whom I choose." "But it seems to me," said Monte Cristo after a moment's silence, "that I crave your pardon for what I am about to say. It seems to me that if Monsieur Notier disinherits Mademoiselle de Villefort because she wishes to marry a young man whose father he detested, he cannot have the same cause for complaint against this dear child Edward." "You are right, Count. Is it not atrociously unjust?" cried Madame de Villefort in tones impossible to describe. "Poor Edward is just as much Monsieur Notier's grandchild as Valentine is, and yet if she were not going to marry Monsieur Franz, she would inherit all his riches. Edward bears the family name, yet, even though she disinherited by her grandfather, she will be 3 times as rich as he." Having thrust this dart, the Count merely listened and said nothing. We will not entertain you longer with our family troubles, Count, said Madame de Villefort. It is quite true that my patrimony will... Monsieur de Villefort. It is quite true that my patrimony will swell the coffers of the poor who are the truly rich. My father has frustrated my legitimate hope without any reason whatsoever. Nevertheless, I have acted as a man of intelligence and feeling. I have promised Monsieur de Epinay the income accruing from this sum, and he shall have it, though I have to suffer the cruelest privations in consequence. When Monsieur de Villefort had finished speaking, the Count rose to depart. Are you leaving us, Count? Said Madame de Villefort. I am obliged to, Madame. I only came to remind you of your promise for Saturday. You will come. Did you think we should forget it? You are too kind, Madame. Now, you must allow me to take leave of you. I am going merely as a looker-on, you understand, to see something that has given me food for many long hours' thought. What is that? The telegraph. There, my secret is out. The telegraph, repeated Madame de Villefort. Yes, indeed. On a hillock at the end of the road, I have sometimes seen these black, accommodating arms shining in the sun like so many spiders' legs, and I assure you they have always filled me up with deep emotion, for I thought that of the strange signs cleaving the air with such precision, conveying the unknown thoughts of one man seated at his table 300 leagues distant, to another man at another table at the other end of the line, that these signs speed through the gray clouds or blue skies solely at the will of the all-powerful operator. Then I began to think of genii, sylphs, gnomes, in short, of occult powers, until I laughed aloud. Nevertheless, I never felt any desire to see at close quarters these fat, well-bellied insects with their long, slender legs, for I feared I might find under their stone-like wings some stiff and pedantic little human genius puffed out with science or sorcery. One fine morning, however, I discovered that the operator of every telegraph was a poor wretch earning a miserable pittance of 12,000 francs, who spent his whole day not in observing the sky as the astronomer does, not in watching the water as the fisherman does, nor yet in studying the landscape as the dreamer does, but in watching that other white-bellied, black-legged insect, his correspondent, placed at some 4 or 5 leagues from him. When I was seized with a strange desire to see this living chrysalis at close quarters, and to be present at the little comedy he plays for the benefit of his fellow chrysalis by putting one piece of tape after another, I will tell you my impressions on Saturday. The Count of Monte Cristo hereupon took his departure. The same evening, the following telegram was read in the Messenger. King Don Carlos has escaped the vigilance exercised over him at Burgos and has returned to Spain across the Catalanian frontier. Barcelona has risen in his favor. All that evening nothing was talked about but Danglars' foresight in selling his shares and his luck from a speculator in having lost but 500,000 francs by the deal. The next day, the following paragraph was read in the Monte. The report published in yesterday's Messenger of the flight of Don Carlos and the revolt of Barcelona is devoid of all foundation. King Don Carlos has not left Burgos, and perfect peace reigns in the peninsula. A telegraphic sign improperly interpreted owing to the fog gave rise to this error. Shares rose to double the price to which they had fallen, so that with what he had actually lost and what he had failed to gain, it made the difference of 1,000,000 francs to Danglars. Telegraphs were different in the day, weren't they? All right, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.